It is
It is
Tuesday. It is
Tuesday,
Tuesday.
Tuesday,
It is Tuesday. It is
Tuesday,
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Excellent. Good job.
And then the moaning of my chair.
Even inanimate objects don't like our singing, apparently. Oh,
We're
that
talking
was a big.
boundaries.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a big sigh. We both just like, boundaries. Boundaries. What are they? What are
I'm
they?
excited though. No, I think this is an exciting one. I've had a lot of focus on boundaries recently. Maybe everyone has.
Go
Maybe it's a
on.
January thing.
Yes. Well, this episode might not come out in January, but
Well, we're recording in
it's
January.
going to continue. Yeah, we're recording it, but I think it's boundaryless. It can release whenever it likes. Uh, Tell me more. Tell me why. Why are you excited about this?
Okay. Well, I have been realizing that I have certain strong boundaries
Mm.
that I set for myself in certain parts of my life that I'm very, very good at. And there's other areas that I can get better at. And then also, so it was Blue Monday the other day, and I made a LinkedIn post about this. But I was reading all of these articles about mental health because basically, Blue Monday, for anyone who doesn't know, is the saddest day of the year, apparently. So it's like the third Monday after holidays. And supposedly this is the saddest. I don't know what census told people this, but
I was going
apparently
to
it's the
ask
saddest. I
why.
don't know. I don't know. I was very curious too. Like I even am a bit nervous saying that. I mean, this is what everyone says it's about, but I don't know. Anyways, so a lot of leaders were posting about boundaries and workplace health and mental health and kind of having that life career balance.
Hmm.
And for me, being a leader, it made me realize, like reading some of the tips that they had, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to implement this. And actually one of them was you that I was thinking about. So just so everyone knows, Christina takes every Sunday off. Like that's like her non-connected day of the week.
Hmm.
And in the past, I think you got used to how I work, but also um I would implement just different things. So what would happen is I think in the weirdest times. Like I will think in the shower. If I take a day off, that's when my best thinking happens. And so I'd come up with all these ideas and I wouldn't want to lose them. So I'd send them to Christina and I would say like at first I wouldn't say anything and then I realized it was like stressing her out to no end. She's like, this is my day off. I was like, well, don't read them then. And I didn't realize because like I have very strong boundaries for that. I just won't take my phone with me if I have a day off, or something like I don't know. I just won't read stuff. It doesn't really bother me. And so, but with Christina, it did. It was like making her anxious, and so I would start like putting in capital letters, "Do not read until you're
Which
back at
I
work."
loved. I loved that you did that. Thank you.
But now I found an even better way because this was a tip that I read on LinkedIn for leaders, and I think anyone can do it. And I think for leaders, it's even more important, and I'll explain why. Um, to use scheduled emails. So you can
Hmm.
write your
Oh,
email. I can write it on a Sunday. I can write it at
yeah.
midnight. I can write it whenever my brain's saying like all of these
Yeah.
billions of ideas. Schedule it to send it to you on Monday morning. Yes.
My friend Lockdown introduced me to the concept of mail butler.
What's that?
It's another inbox management style system that allows you to do a little bit more than just schedule. I'm just putting it
Oh,
out there, but it's something for you and I. But yes, in exactly that same vein. Please go on.
okay. Oh, I love it. But it made me think about, okay, what was life like when I was an employee, right? And I'm someone who, like I said, I get my best ideas around the clock. So I do think about work outside of work. It's just who I am, it's how I'm built. I love what I do. But that doesn't mean I want to be on at all times. And if I have an employer or a manager or whatever who messages me at all hours, I'm very inclined to respond at all hours. And that perpetuates the system of never turning off. And that's just what I kept thinking about. Like, yes, Bombshells is international. Yes, we're working on different time zones a lot of times. Um, but that doesn't mean that everybody should be on at all times. And I really want to celebrate having those off times because I think it makes you more prepared when you're on. So yeah, that was such an eye opener to me. Scheduled emails and maybe this mail butler.
I want to highlight two things though that I heard was one, you managed my expectations, so acknowledging
Mm.
that different people's boundaries look different. And you're 100% right. And I was so grateful because this is what happens when you get a work wife is that people do start, like a good work wife will start to read between the lines. So she would hear that I would respond immediately and she'd be like, you don't have to do that. And I'm like, and I would respond, yes, I do. But yes, I do. And so when she managed that expectation, sometimes it gets you into a mode where you feel it's safety. I felt safer. I felt like, and sometimes I didn't at the beginning, I didn't have the words to express that to you. And so I want to highlight that one, which was the management of expectations that's based out of empathy for where I was coming from rather than, but this is how I do it. So why don't you just understand? Which you didn't do. You were like, oh, this is clearly, you could see that. So I want to thank you for the empathy. And then number two, finding a system that automates so that you can put something in and be more efficient in your way, which was great.
Yes. And it is. And that's the other thing is like for me to put those ideas down, it's an offload. But that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean I need you to pick them up right away. So if
Right.
there's a better way to create a safeguard so that you don't feel like you need to pick up what I'm offloading,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I want to go after.
I think there's also, when you were talking about the employer side of things, I think I've been exploring a lot in my research into the future of work, the great resignation, this power play that traditionally existed between employers and employees, or people who are hiring and people who are being contracted to do work, because they're different constructs now. One of the things that I was realizing is it still traditionally wasn't a two-way street. So to take that previous example you gave with the employers, I would model behavior. We model
Mm.
in within our environment, to a certain extent, some more than others. And I think that's where the boundaries do come in, and understanding and being okay with not subscribing to the same boundaries or lack thereof, and then being able to justify that professionally can, for me, help me sleep at night. And I've had this conversation a lot with people over the years. So I wanted to highlight that as well.
I think that's a really good point, and I think it's so easy to lose sight of things, even now with bombshells, for example. Um, it's so easy to lose sight of what it's like to be an employee and have kind of a bit of a power play because
Mm,
sometimes as leaders you don't feel like there's a power play. You're like, "Oh, I feel like I'm treating you just the same and this and that," and you probably are, but there is a power play. And I think what happens is, for example, let's take a traditional workplace.
mm-hmm.
Um and let's take like a newer employee, right? So someone who's maybe just out of school or just back from maternity leave or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
you may not feel comfortable taking time off, being late to work, quote unquote late, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But you're on 24/7 because your boss is messaging you and you're responding right away because you feel this
Yes.
sense of urgency. So then you're modeling that behavior, but you don't have the elasticity to disengage, to be late, to rewrite your hours the
Yeah.
way you do when you're a leader,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes in traditional workforces.
In 9 to 5s, like I call them the 9 to 5s. And if you're in a probationary period, especially because you're in that first 3 months, you're in proving mode. I know I
Mm-hmm.
can do this. And you're subconsciously and consciously scanning your environment for models to emulate. And if your boss is responding, you are emulating what you define to be the culture. And workplace culture is another thing that I'm really interested in and explore a lot and coach a lot on in the gig based economy, because it's a nebulous culture. And so you
Mm-hmm.
go into a small business, and you and I have had multiple conversations about different sized businesses and different levels of structure and lack of structure. And and conscious culture and unconscious culture within environments. So having a subconscious emulation of behavior and a workplace culture, whether people know that they're doing that or not. Some people who are your senior managers are so stressed that they're feeling like that's all they can do is reply at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, and they're perpetuating a culture, but they don't necessarily want to.
Yeah, they may not even realize they
They
are.
may not realize it, and people are coping. Again, that comes back to that empathy piece that I find really interesting when I do coaching for people on their career paths, because I think a lot of people, when they enter the workplace at any point, a new workplace or a new environment, let's call it, they assume that their seniors in the workplace have a good grasp on how to help them succeed. They assume that those leaders have thought about the things that they are thinking about, but they do not, at the same time, take any time to think about what the leader's responsibilities might be and where they sit within that priority. It's like a framework. And once you do understand, and that's why I think the power of empathy in the workplace is so underrated, especially in the gig-based economy and creative and emerging creative industries especially, we are just starting to highlight these alt currencies that I like to call them, and value them in different ways, but they are such a massive underpinning of how you retain your team.
Interesting. If you want to retain your team.
If
But
you want
even
to retain your team. Yep.
if we're talking about gig-based economies, but even to have your team work at their most productive.
Yes.
Let's say, for example, because that's
Agreed.
the other side of it. Like, even if you're doing contract work and you're in and out different organizations, you still want to work as productively and effectively as possible. And for that, you need the space to do so. So how do you, and I think it's even harder in the gig-based economy, like especially if you're a company that hires on a lot of freelancers, for example, or contractors. It can be really difficult because you're learning these people, these individuals every single time.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
you and I have had a relationship for a long time now. We know how each other works. It's second nature. We've sussed it all out. It's easy. But when you have, a quick turnover, that's a whole learning curve to learn how to manage people differently, to communicate to them differently. What is going to hurt one person's feelings, the other person is going to feel like you're being ambiguous and they don't understand what you're trying to tell them. I've had employers in the past who are trying to like talk around the bush, and I just had to tell them, like, okay, you gotta, or what is it, beat around the bush, I was like, you gotta just tell me what you're trying to say, because I'm not gonna get it. I need you to be really blunt.
And that's the two-way street that we talk about, because you're comfortable enough in yourself. And we've talked about this before on the show, where I've had moments where I explained that when I was growing up and in my early 20s, anytime someone would disagree with me or I would feel uncomfortable, I'd go bright red. I had no ability to conflict resolve. I was just full of like right on the edge of cortisol all the time, of like
with your family. I just don't understand how that's possible.
I had just such incredible imposter syndrome and an incredible perfectionist kind of behaviors, where I did not want to look like I didn't know what I was doing. It gripped me just the same way that stage fright gripped me. I did not want to stand there. And even to this day, yesterday I was in the studio with Carl and he was like, "You're going to belt." And I was like, and I started, and he was like, "Do not give me this. You are going to do it. You are amazing and you're going to do it and it's going to come out." And I was like, "But my voice just isn't built this way." And I was like, I've been to one of the best theater schools in the world, and to this day still have that. But my point is,
but wait, did you do it?
I did.
Yay!
How it sounds. Carl wrote me today. He was like, "You were vulnerable and you were out there and you were brave, and that's what matters." And I think it's an ongoing thing for everyone that's watching and listening. We get so many people, and I love you all for writing in and sending notes and voice notes and saying like, hey, I heard this one piece where it was like, I didn't feel like I could do it and I did it anyway. I normalized failing. Now I've lost my train of thought. Why was I talking about that?
Boundaries.
Just go back to the title of the when I said, yeah, I was talking about not being able to,
manage
deal with
up.
conflict and communicate.
Yeah.
And when someone is managing you and you're going into a system where you want people to like you, you want to be accepted and you want to stay on the team, even if it's in a contract-based way, sometimes more so because people have this myth of being able to choose anyone else in future. And there's so many people to choose from and everyone's fighting for this job, which I don't disagree with. I just think it's not a helpful mentality to have. You're worried. And so you don't want to say, I don't know this. You don't want to say, hey, look, please speak to me this way. You don't want to say, I'm not good at this, but I am good at this. We're not taught how to communicate to our employers or contractors or in any direction. Yeah. And so the thing that I always want to break down, and what you and I do so well, is think about what allows us to feel confident in doing it in such a way that gives enough space for other people to find their own version. Because I see you do it when you say, I'm going to put this out here. Here's a piece that I know about me, and here's a piece that I know about you. And you do that. And for me, I write things down, and I'll send you a written note and say, I'm feeling this way. I'm just going to step back because I'm thinking that this might be happening with me. And I get very into it. You're very good at being empathetic in that time of crisis. I go into like meltdown mode and just write my thing and say, now I've got to walk away. And I know that we have a foundation of trust where we know that it's not about a personal thing. So how do you, if you're watching or listening to this, how do you deal with conflict to begin with? And then how do you reduce that into the smallest behavior or a smallest incident in a day where you think, I could have said something differently? Mm-hmm. And distill it that way. Okay,
so now I want to take this in a couple directions, because boundaries are everywhere. So we've kind of talked about, communication boundaries. What about boundaries with either, I want to leave it in careers for a second here. Let's say a coworker who it's not managing up, it's not managing down, but it's just a coworker who is crossing a boundary with you in how they speak to you. So let's say they're speaking down to you, or they're speaking or they throw you under the bus a lot, or let's just say they're in some way, shape, or form, they're crossing a boundary with you.
Okay.
What's your...
Can I clarify? Okay, I love that question. And I've had so many people come to me with this. And
I thought you were going to say cross my boundaries.
Oh. At this stage, babes, I have no bound. I'm not good with these boundaries things. I'm working on this. I'm a work in progress. But truly, the first thing I would ask in a lot of the different training I've done in the last couple of years in development is that real? Mm-hmm. Is someone really speaking to you that way? Or is this your perception? And when people have come to me, and because I am often the person in between, the go-to between the employer and the employee, I'll have an employer say to me, this person spoke to me this way. And I'll know the employee. And I trust my relational sense. And I've known them for a lot longer. And I know the employer. And my response is, oh, okay. What else is happening? What else is happening in the environment? What else is happening with you sometimes? And taking a step back and saying, is this real? Is number one. If you believe that it is something that is affecting you, and I will be very clear as well, the feeling that you are receiving or how you are feeling is real. You're feeling that. But you have a choice on what you want to act on and not. So if you take that and say, okay, I am feeling this, but we can never see into someone. I mean, you can, because you're studying persuasive communications and you Professor X me all the time, but most people can't see into other people's minds. So remembering that is what you've decided is just important for you to then be able to have a bit more freedom of choice. Then you turn around and say, okay, not this person's made me feel, because Larry taught me that no one can make you feel anything. Saying, I'm feeling this. Is this real? Is this person really doing this? How is this now impacting me? And what is what boundary, what is the core thing that I am feeling is affected by this? And those questions, I can guarantee you, myself included, I don't ask that. I just freak out. I just freak out and go on a rant. So once you know those, when you have that and you have someone speak to you in a way that you don't love, I would suggest do that first. Number 2, again, a beautiful Larry moment is approach it with curiosity. Why do I think this person is doing this? And because an ideal situation for me as a default, and I am going to just put this out there as a default, is I always feel more powerful when I am asking why instead of placing blame. Because it disempowers someone else from being defensive. And I think that's the other big thing is if I am in a safe place, I go, why would you say that to me in that way? I'm curious. Instead of, how could you say that to me? I'm upset. Mm-hmm. And just learning how to normalize, and that takes time, and I fail all the time at that. But I know that I want to achieve that. So those would be that would be my top 2 first ones. There are a lot more ways that you can communicate and you can get really, really into it. But in the heat of the moment, those are my 2 big things.
I think those are really good. I think the other thing that I would add to that, for me, what I tend to do is question, how much do I really need to deal with this person? And is it worth the emotional lift of the conversation?
That's a very good point.
To stay calm and cool and collected and to make that lift, it does take effort. It takes real effort, and especially if you're not trying to just offload on someone. I think that's what you're talking about. There's a difference between offloading, like, you made me feel shitty, so therefore I'm angry at you. That's offloading your emotions. Versus, okay, I want to make a change here because I want to keep a working, healthy relationship. That takes effort, and that takes respect, and that takes,
you're right,
taking a step back and saying, like, okay, let me breathe through this, figure out why it's bothering me. Is this a me thing, a them thing? And is this a constant thing? And then, depending on how much energy and time it takes, and if it really is crossing a value of yours, you can decide whether it's worth dealing with. Or, like, I've had it before where I've had to deal with someone every now and then. They were super, super rude to everyone in the office, not just me. But I was like, you know what? I deal with them like once every 3 months. Do I really need to have a discussion with this person? No. I feel bad for other people having to deal with them daily, but on my end, I'm okay. I'm okay. I don't need to have this discussion with them.
And if I can add to that, you also didn't feel like you were the person who had to write them.
To write them?
To write them. Like, as in,
put them in their place. Correct them. Yeah.
And I put my hands up, both hands, and say, I can be very guilty of doing that.
What does that mean? Can you explain that more?
Yeah, so I can get into savior mentality. And that can also include me not liking it when someone tells someone else how to be, so much that I will go and stand up for them. And I get it from both my parents in different ways, in the best ways, because they're protective and they do not like to see injustice happening. They do not like to see that. And neither do I. However, I think there's something to be said for knowing yourself well enough to know when you are trying to do that so that you look good, versus knowing that that is a toxic thing, that really the action, whether it's to you or someone else, is a breach of your fundamental values. And so I think that's a good distinction as well that you just made, that you were like, I am allowing and trusting that other people can handle themselves, and I am not going to try and put this person in their place or rectify this situation, because I do not need to. And I think it's important to know what you're talking about values, I'm talking about values, and then those real core fundamental values.
That's a really good point, because I will say there has been times in the past where it has been like a real fundamental value that something was crossed, and I did address that right away. But that's, or the other thing is going through the right channels. Like, am I really, if I'm an employee at a company, the right person to have this discussion with that person, or does that turn into intercultural bickering?
Yeah.
Does that actually take the power away? Maybe if it's something really fundamental and really wrong, I need to go to my management and say, listen, this is something that's going on. I don't think I'm the right person to deal with this, but I cannot continue to see this happening. So something needs to happen and this needs to change.
And I think that works in professional and personal, because you really can. Sometimes you say, am I the right person to deal with this right now? And sometimes you say, no, I need to go to a trained
bat for this, like,
a professional, a counselor, a therapist, or someone where I realize that I need to vent. I mean, sometimes I just call Dad, and Dad's amazing like this. Mum's really good as well, but Dad is so structured that he will pick up the phone and I'll be like, Dad, I'm really, really pissed. And he'd be like, okay, do you need solutions, or do you need to vent, or do you want a combination of the two? And he'll just ask like 3 questions. And I'm like, vent, I'll take vent. And he's like, okay, you have 10 minutes. And I'm like, okay. And I'll just go, and then at the end, he'll be like, okay, done? I'm like, no. Okay, bye, love you, bye.
Stop. Oh my God. Okay, we need this to be a clip, and this just needs to go out for all men everywhere. This is how right? To be a good partner.
This is because anything. Dad has 3 daughters.
That's what I was gonna say.
Dad, he's him, and I'm proud of him for just, he's who he is. But also it helps that he has 3 daughters who are like, blah, 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 blah.
He's cracked it. He's cracked the female code that, like, honestly, 90% of the time, you just need to vent. You don't want a frickin' solution. Just let me get it out.
The thing is, my parents are the perfect combination, because Dad will do that, and then I'll go to Mum and I'll be like, Mum. She'll be like, yes, what do you need? I'll do it right now. I'll get everything for you right now, and more things than you could ever think of, and I'll send you a card. And she doesn't tell me, and she just sends a card later anyway. She just preempts everything.
Aww.
It's good combo. Raquelle gets to meet my parents soon. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited. Oh my gosh. I've talked to both of them online, like Zoom Live, but you know, I get to meet them in the real flesh.
But let's digress into, I mean, let's kind of swap over into that personal, because I think that's I think just professional, for me, professional existence is a polite personal existence. That's what I like to call it.
So
I'm like, and so whenever I have things in the workplace, I'm like, ooh, this is just a polite way of learning
so good
about my personal relationships.
I enjoy that.
Yes, me too. And so but there's a lot more emotional, and there can be a lot more emotional involvement, obviously, on the personal side. And I think even with, I'm going to give you one story of a woman who called. I had given her one of Mum's masks that Mum made a bunch of masks at the start of the pandemic, and they're amazing. And I gave one to her. She's a neighbor, and she called a year later, and she said, in short, "You're amazing. You're so kind. I love your mother's mask that she made. How are you? I just want to ask you if, I have, and she gave me her story, and she had some tragedy, some family tragedy, but she did have family, some family. And I spoke to her for 25 minutes, and she said, so I would love, if you would like to have someone to talk to, I'm available, and I would love to talk to you every now and then. You can just give me a call because I'm lonely and I'm alone. And immediately I just felt the need to put very strong boundaries up. And I was heartbroken at the same time because I love to save and be saved and all this. I have that propensity. But immediately I was like, I have gone through this so many times that I cannot even let you think that I might. I am not going to be polite about saying, I'm not going to call you. Because the verbiage as well was, if you want to. It was very passive. It was, if you'd like to do that, then that would be great for me. And for me, I was like, I want to say yes to everybody, but I have to say no right now. And it was really, really tough. It was really tough.
That reminds me of something I just thought of. And my mom's like, "You're ruthless." And I was like, she's like, "I hope I never get on your bad side.
I don't want to grow up to become you, Raquelle."
Oh my gosh. But I've had, and this is also setting boundaries, and they're not easy conversations, but I think it's important. So I've had a few things happen in the past. So for example, like old friends. I don't know about everyone else, but I moved a lot growing up, and I find that my friendship groups moved in seasons. I don't know. Maybe this is normal for everybody who live even in the same place forever. I'm not sure. I just know my life.
You haven't been anyone else.
No. So sometimes you had friendships that had a season and it was great and you loved those friends so very much and that's lovely. And then you outgrow each other for whatever reason. And sometimes it's explosive, the end, and sometimes it's calm. I feel like as you get older, it gets calmer and calmer. You just usually drift. But, especially when you're younger, those can be more explosive. And a few years ago now, I had an old friend contact me, and we had a not so great end to our friendship. And I had basically drawn the line and been like, this isn't healthy for me anymore. I'm kind of walking away from this friendship. And we actually had to have the conversation because it wasn't one of those that you could just drift away from. It was a bit too close for that.
Yeah.
And I think that in a close friendship can be kind of mean, to be honest. I think I'd rather just be clear that, we're just growing apart. And
I'm the same.
Yeah, I don't think it's very nice to just stop picking up and have someone wonder. I just don't. So I had that conversation. It didn't go that well, but whatever. And then what made it a bit worse was we had mutual friends. So sometimes they wanted the friendship to work so bad that they would try to get involved. Right. And so I think that just made the end of the friendship even worse because it got a little bit more explosive. Anyways, doesn't matter. That was so many years ago. I was like maybe 20 when that happened. Okay. And then just a few years ago, she had contacted me and she wanted to go hash things out over a coffee. And I was like,
why?
Right? I was like, I'm in a very different place in my life, have great memories from when we were friends, but I just I had to say no. I had to be like, I'm just not interested. I was like, I love you. I'm not. And she's like, I think we need to get past what we're angry about or whatever. And I was like, I'm not angry. There's nothing to get past.
There's no road. There's nothing to get past.
We're just different people. And even if we're not, it's done. We're so past that. And
you're complete. If I'm hearing you correctly, you were complete and she was not.
Right. I was so good. And I was like, no, this is it. And then a year or two after that, she invited me to her wedding. And I was
Were you clear? Were you clear?
I was so clear. I was crystal clear. Never went on the thing. Told her I have no anger towards you. I wish you all the best in life. It's just I don't think we're ever going to really move forward as friends. So, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Um,
Goodbye.
yeah, and then she invited me to her wedding, and I was like, I appreciate that. That's really kind of you, but I think that you should really reserve that special day for people you're close to. That's My mom was like, "You're so mean." I'm like, that's not
I was gonna
mean.
say
I thought that was a nice way to put it.
I
Like,
think that's extremely nice. I would almost say, like, just to reconfirm what I'd said before, I'm not interested in our friendship. Please remove me from your mailing list. I don't.
from your mailing list.
What do you say? Like, best regards.
But also, like, I think that would be so sad. Imagine someone coming to your wedding that you've invited, and they like have no interest in supporting you. I don't want someone at my wedding who.
But
If
again,
you get an invite and you don't want to support me, don't fucking come.
take the empathy.
Sorry.
Take the empathy. You're like, oh, a smell. Take the empathy moment. Clearly, this means a lot to. Clearly, this is still incomplete. There's some kind of really deep thing. And again, let's go back to the workplace boundary. When someone treats you in a way that you're like, whoa, what just happened there? Get curious and be like, wait, why did she? Because you're like, wouldn't that be sad? But that's your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
That why she might be inviting you as a like, I'm still thinking of this person. I'm incomplete. So I need to keep trying to get some kind of validation, i.e. some kind of closure. And I don't know. I don't know. Ask Larry. but I think it happens. And I think it happens for various reasons. And I think I'm finally at the stage where I'm recognizing why people cut people off and just ghost. It takes me almost everything in my power to finally get to that point where I just do not respond. Because I'm normally the person, again, savior. I'm normally like, here, I'm not gonna not reply to you anymore, and here's why. And then they'll respond, and I'll be like, look, here's why. And they'll respond, and I'll be like, look, just to be really clear, and I'm a pretty clear person. I am pretty clear. But now there are some people where I'm like, block.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And then
There's definitely people. And, I've had falling outs, not very often because I am very, very close with the majority of my family, but I've had to take breaks from certain family members, and I am absolutely okay with putting my mental health first and stepping away from a family member. I've done it. There's certain family members I stopped talking to for a couple years. And then over time, it was like, okay, I'm ready to have, maybe a healing conversation, maybe not. But
yeah,
I think and it's definitely not something I practice often. And it's absolutely a last resort. But I think you have to protect yourself and you have to set boundaries.
but not
or you're
walls.
going to be miserable.
I think you're right, and I think Raven, my big sister, is always like. Yesterday, she sent me a voice note, and she just basically, as usual, just magically pulls the universal message that I need to hear, and just shoves it into my brain. Like, it's the creepiest, most magical thing. But she wrote, and I had just said to like something else. I was like, oh, blah blah blah. I'm feeling a little bit about this, and she was like, oh, you have a boundary problem, and I was like, what? Oh. And that was light bulb moment. But I think there's also we can talk about boundaries, and in some of the courses I've done, people say, well, boundaries is just another way of saying it's a wall. And
I disagree with that.
But I think that can be true in some situations. And so I think it's always worth, like, I love to think of boundaries as membranes. I love to be like, you know what? I'm safe enough that, because my big thing at the moment is give and forget, receive and remember, and love anyway. And in order for me to do those three things,
give and forget, receive and remember,
love anyway.
Oh, that's cute.
So I have that on my bathroom wall because I can be very judgmental, and I can say, they didn't do this, they didn't do that, and I can be transactional if I'm not careful. And boundaries can be a way for me to just cut people out and not acknowledge what might be happening to me that caused that situation on both
Okay, but I
sides.
want to dig into that then because, okay, for me, boundaries are all around respecting my well being and they are not person specific. So
Okay.
they would be in line with my values and they would be in line with my mental and physical health. So basically, let's just say, for example, if I'm really busy with school, that has to be my priority. I'll let you
Mm-hmm.
know I'm going to be really busy. I can't give this extra time, but I'm also going to let every friend in Canada, because I'm in Canada right now, know the
Mm-hmm.
same. I'm not spending time with them either because this is so it's the
Right.
same message is coming across for my boundary to everybody. Yes.
The reason that am I'm currently struggling with it, and I love that you do that because you do that very well, is that if I do that, I get so, and you know how structured I am, I get so
Mm-hmm.
structured that it doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
what happens to anyone else. I'm just like, boom, I'm not doing this, and I'm gone. And it's like, it's pure indifference.
Mm.
And that is when it is a wall for me. For you,
Okay.
you're still like kind. You're still kind
You're so
throughout.
kind. You're still
Whereas,
kind.
I mean, yeah, if I finally get to that point, I go, no, everything, I go into full on fort lockdown, and I'm not listening to the world, and I'm not listening to if someone calls me and I can hear that their need is actually greater than mine in that moment. And I
Mm.
think that's a really important distinction with relationships, especially with intimate ones, is that I realized that I was at one phase in my life, I was so much about me and I'd made such clear boundaries that even if someone else was suffering, I couldn't see it. And I couldn't then be a good partner to that person and realize that at this particular moment, their need outweighed mine. And so I was okay with letting that boundary be that membrane and it passing through and staying for a minute. And that's what
Mm.
I'm navigating now with great difficulty because I don't want to be unkind. And like when I spoke to this lady, I was like, I did say, if you need me, if you need something, I will be there. But it is not in my interest, and I do not want to call you. And I literally said that. And I said, I have to and the reason is I have to prioritize my family.
Mm.
And that's why. But if you need me and that it is a need, then that is a greater need than me spending frivolous time with my family. Someone needs me, and I'm available for that. And I think that's a really, I think coming back to what we're talking about is, again, you're going to do a solo episode on intuitive living. And I think you intuitively know. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you're like, I'm really struggling, I can guarantee you, if you were like, I'm really struggling, I'm overwhelmed, and I called you and said, I need you to be in Vancouver, like right now, I would not ask this, but I'm freaking out. Even if you had a test the next day, I can pretty
Yeah.
much guarantee you would be like, I'll be there.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas for
Mm-hmm.
me, I wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And that scares me that I wouldn't at this stage. And so I'm actively going, okay, I know that I don't want to be like that. And so creating the boundaries as a membrane is really important to me, and making sure that it is not a wall. Because for you, a wall is like a fluid term. for
Well, for a boundary is a fluid term, but a
mm,
wall for me, I do have walls. And I
mm,
am like you in the sense that when my walls go up, it is
it's done.
impenetrable. Absolutely. I mean, that's like that girl. I put up a wall with that old friend.
I don't
That was
know
a
that you,
wall.
but I don't know that you did. I feel like you didn't put up a wall. She just floated away. Like it wasn't, you don't, a wall takes energy. A wall you have to keep up. A wall you have to like maintain, even if it's a little bit. But I would argue for you, you're the type of person that you're like, this person just doesn't exist to me anymore. Like
But is
that,
that not
there's
a wall?
no, seas don't have walls. They just keep going. Like something drifts along into the sea, and you don't just go, oh yeah, it's gonna hit that wall, and then it's never. Because if there's a wall, it can land on one side or the other. With yours, it just doesn't exist anymore. Like just it's gone.
Like it's
Right?
okay. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
gone.
It's just gone. It's part of the universe now.
And I mean, I had to do the same thing with my dad. So like I didn't grow up with my dad being very close to me.
Mm.
And then when I hit my like adulthood, early adulthood, he all of a sudden took a keen interest and wanted to do all of these things, like, I don't know, take me to the museum and this and that. And I had to have a very difficult talk with him, but I was very clear. There was no nonsense. There was no back and forth. It was very, very
Mm.
clear. We will never get that time back. And that's okay. I'm not angry at you. I'm not upset. I'm not hurt.
Mm.
I
Mm.
was when I was younger, but I had dealt with that by that point. And I told him, I said, we can have a relationship from now onwards as adults, but it's never going to be us with, a father daughter relationship. It'll be whatever we make it grow into now.
Mm-hmm.
We can't
That's
make up
great.
for that.
Yeah.
And I think that's really difficult is having boundaries with family and close friends. To me, that's the part that I struggle on. You are
Mm.
amazing at it. You make me feel so safe.
Oh,
Jean makes me
thanks.
feel so safe. Like, I feel
I'm
like
glad.
you two, I can be clear with. No, you do. You really do. You listen and you respond. You don't react. If you do react, I know your reactions, so I don't take it seriously. I wait 24 hours and wait for the second message that says I've thought about it.
Exactly. Good job.
But you're good about it, and so I feel safe that I can, melt down. It's okay. But or I can say, okay, this is too much, or this whatever. Like I know
Mm.
that it's a safe space. I know you're going to take what I say seriously. But with some people, you don't have that, and it can be really, really tough.
Yeah. It is tough. Agreed. And there are people that I care a lot about that, you know, it it's hard because that is I know I can't go to them for certain things.
Mm.
And that's the other thing with boundaries that I want to, kind of as we're talking about it with all of you and you're thinking about this in your in as you go about your day to day, what are boundaries um that I that I have? What are ones that I would like to have? And how are and what do other people's boundaries look like? And I think that's a really important thing to kind of leave you all with is really addressing, what is someone else's boundaries? And do I and just to remind everyone that you can respect other people's boundaries, but you also don't have to admire them. I have some people
Mm.
where I respect boundaries and I don't admire them because I recognize that someone is demonstrating to me that they are more important at all costs and that my crisis is not something that is a safe thing to share with them. And then I can respect that, which is what I'm learning right now is I can respect that, but I don't admire it in my closest circle of people. And I think that's one epiphany that happened recently. It repeatedly in the last 12 months was I was like, oh, how I respond to someone who is in crisis, I am expecting other people to do the same thing. And I'm learning very, very slowly that that is not the case. And it doesn't mean that and I still have to love anyway and go, okay, I love this person for who they are, but that is not how they set boundaries and that is not what they do. I do not, I do, I respect it, but I don't admire it. Whereas the people who I'll call up and say, I'm having a panic moment, will literally go, drop, drop, drop everything, go on. and that's what I admire because that's what
Mm-hmm.
I personally need. So when you're listening to this or thinking about it or looking at who you are, um, you know, really ask yourself that question, I would say.
Absolutely. I absolutely love that. And then I think the other side of that, just before we end, is really look at, and we'll talk about this when we do the episode on intuitive living, how does that make you feel and how much energy is that taking from you? Because for some people that might be okay to keep them around and just know that you can't go to them for certain things. And with other people, it might mean they shouldn't really be part of your circle anymore.
Exactly. So, as you go into your week, happy boundary setting, BBs. BBs and boundaries.
BBs and boundaries. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, bombshells. In order to continue to elevate, subscribe and don't forget to click that little bell so you can get notified every time we have a new badass brunch. Until next time, stay focused, fierce, and fabulous.